I think it was Katarina that said, I can't remember which of you who said what, but said the beautiful words that every right you are born with is a treasure, and is a treasure to keep. And then we need to remember those that are born without rights, and how we can make sure that we don't just keep our treasures for ourselves, but that we fight to share, and that everyone gets. Mugwena, I may be too personal now, but I think you were one of the people in the world who experienced to be born without many of those treasures, at the same time as you lived alongside people who were given those treasures as a privilege. You've, as a person, as a teacher, as a trade unionist, lived through a life of not having the rights, and then being able to access them and become an activist in how to further develop them. Please, Mugwena, share with us how you have experienced the role of trade unions, of teachers, of education in the transition from apartheid to democracy in South Africa.
I was just whispering with Manuela that it's a very progressive panel with one man. So let me thank Mary and Al for really believing in us, believing in our unions, believing in the mobilization and organization of the teaching profession, and believing in public schooling and public education. Thanks to the founders of Education International and the founder of Albert Shankar Institute. And thanks to our moderators, Haldis, David, and Mary Catherine. And thanks to Randy for inviting us to be here again. And my friends, Katerina and Olga, seeing you often. We were together in the UK. We have spent wonderful time there. And thanks, Susan and Manuela, for reminding me, Manuela, about fascism. So as I was listening to Randy, and I was saying, did we know that 6 January 2020 would see what we have seen in America? We never had that in our mind. And I think, Mary, you were here today. 30 years ago when you founded EI, you thought that democracy is anchored. Democracy has helped us not to go back. Which has to remind us that democracy needs a very strong public education, because public education is a cornerstone of democracy, and the principles and concepts of democracy have to be taught in our schools. And Randy, you are right, not only being taught and learned, but also have to be put in practice, have to be applied, because the moment we think that everything is okay, that's the time we are being taken back. Fascism is back. Manuela, you fought against fascism. But we see it rising. We see it being emboldened today. We have seen insurrection. We have seen insurrection in South Africa in July last year. We see all these particular signs, and all of them are telling us about how it's important for us to keep on fighting for public education, because public education promises and would provide that access to all to education, quality education. that public education promises that it will be able to make education available and accessible to those who have been born without those particular rights, as you said, Haldis, and so forth, and therefore help them to deal with ignorance, help them to deal with the fears, and so that they can be able to become activists, and so that they are able to defend public education and democracy, because the intersection is very clear. Where I grew up and born in South Africa, as you correctly put it, Haldis, my grandmother always reminded me, she didn't go to school, she was denied education, but she always taught me something. She used to say, my child, until you are out of the field, then you can see the mud on your feet. And public education is that tool that then will be able to, for us to see indeed and be aware of the world we're living in and the dangers and threats and challenges that are facing us in the 21st century. When we thought that the Western countries have learned lessons when the World War II was ended, they did one thing, very beautiful thing. That's what they did. They built infrastructure. They built public education system. They built public health systems because they knew that when the people are happy and the people are able to enjoy the highest level of the standard of living, they are likely to defend education. They are likely to believe in democracy and believe in governments that will then be able to enhance the protection of our human rights and therefore be able to fund public education, public health, and many other institutions, and they did that very well. But we never thought that in today we will see governments or organizations that are calling themselves Finland for the Finnish. We didn't know that it can happen in the country that is always rated the happiest country in the world. Something must tell us that we have got to do more, because where education and democracy intersect, we are then able to say public education, it's able to help us, like me, who I was born without those rights, and I was given those particular rights not because I was too special, but it's because the people fought. It is because of the blood that was shed by our people to fight for freedom and democracy. So as we celebrate tomorrow, Manuela, we're celebrating on Thursday. On the 27th, was it's a Freedom Day for us, because Mandela was then released from jail for many, many years and became the only democratically elected government in many, many centuries. Of course, 360 years of enduring colonialism of a special type. And after enduring the apartheid rule that had stripped all of us of our rights, of our dignity, and so forth. So the day 27 April ushered in hope for us. It ushered in that belief in ourselves by restoring our dignity. Obviously, we were born with dignity. Nobody can steal that dignity from us. But yes, it was invaded. It was devastated. And therefore, it restored that dignity for us so that we can be able to integrate our society that was divided, so that we can democratize our institutions, our education system, so that we can be able to usher in collective bargaining, to making sure that we strengthen those particular institutions, to ensure that the teachers are supported, to ensure that our children who basically were left without education, no infrastructure for many centuries, are able to also enjoy that particular right to education. So we can talk about poverty. Because if we talk about intersections, there are so many intersectionalities that we have got to recognize that education as a cornerstone, and public education is a cornerstone of democracy. It is also a tool that we are using in a country to fight against poverty, to fight against corruption, which is a threat in our country after we have seen this particular dream of being free and enjoying our freedom and our democracy, but we are seeing the threat of a corruption that is beginning to take away those particular rights, including the right to education, by defunding education. And therefore we have got to stand together and say an injury to one is an injury to all, as we stand with our colleagues from Ukraine to say the war must end. The war has to end. We have to fight and support each other to ensure that the war has to end. The war must end in Sudan. The war must end everywhere where there's war, because it is not a solution. We have built institutions in the United Nations, and therefore we need to be able to stand up as a united voice, as the teachers and the education workers all over the world, to say that we don't need war. We need money to build our schools. We need money to support those who do not have access to education, to support those girls in Afghanistan who are refused education. That is what we need to be doing. That we need that money for more things rather than seeing the money going into war. But do our government listen?
No.
They don't listen. They believe in what they believe. They live in darkness, and they have this ignorance. They have this thing of burying their head in the sand like an ostrich, even when they are being taught every day that education is not an expense, that education is an investment, and therefore that is what we have got to come together as Education International and all of us to fight for the right to education, the right of education to be funded, in particular public education. So this democracy that we have seen in the United States on the 6th of January and everywhere else can only say something to us, Randy. It is that we cannot relax.
Yep.
We just cannot relax. It says to us that we have got to do more. We've got to commit ourselves to fight for the human rights, to fight for our institutions, as correctly put in our book there, Susan, that if we don't defend these particular institutions, if we don't defend democracy, democracy cannot defend itself. Democracy cannot just survive just because it's democracy. It's a beautiful word. We think that it should have survived, obviously, without us doing anything. But I think we'll be making a very big mistake in the 21st century if we cannot follow the example of Al-Shenka, Mary Futrell here, and many others who founded Education International, to say we have got to take this particular baton and run with it and make sure that public education finally is the winner. That each and every child in the whole world is a winner that can access public education so that they can be able to defend and fight for their strengthening and the intensification of our institution, to be able to expose lies, to expose fake news, to expose infodemics and ignorance, so that we are then able to win. So that's where I come from, Haldis, where we believe that public education, indeed, like everyone says, teaches us to live together. Can we be able to take that promise and that project forward and not allow it to fail? We have to live together as human beings. That is how we are, and that's how we must see ourselves at a global level, that we are human beings, and therefore we've got to live together. Those who invade paying taxes, Susan, as you have put it, have got to be exposed. And it can only be us who are able to do research, who are able to put evidence on the table, and then be able to run those particular campaigns to expose our governments, to expose multinational companies that are stealing money, that are invading taxes and impoverishing the already poor countries that are not able to, promise education to their people. The debt that our countries are swimming in, that is what we have got to fight and expose, so that those particular debts can be cancelled. Because countries in Africa, where I come from, are not able to provide this public education, which is a public good, which is a human right entrenched in terms of Article 26. But they cannot be able to do that unless we are able to do something about the debts that they are swimming in. My country is now the highest unequal country in the world today. And therefore, that is a threat to democracy, because where people are not happy, where people are restless, disillusioned, it is easy to identify democracy as an enemy, and they will then come and suffer from apathy that you were saying, and say, we don't want to vote. We believe we need to be strong and be able to educate our children that voting is power, that voting is a right we must never forgo, because that is the only way we will make the right decisions about our future, about the future of our country and the world we live in. Is because of we continue to support democracy. So thank you, Haldis, for the opportunity.
Mugwena, thank you so very much.